Hello everybody, my name's Wolf, and through this series of videos I'm going to explain to you the crazy, over-the-top world that nerds like me love so much, that is Warhammer 40,000. So get comfy, strap in, and prepare for a Noob-Splaining session. The Adeptus Mechanicus, or the AdMech, have always been featured in the lore and stories of the Great Imperium of Man. Arguably, they are the backbone of the entire Imperium. While humanity provides the soldiers in the form of raw troops by either the Imperial Guard or the Space Marines, it is the AdMech that supplies the armour, weapons, transports, and the mighty space vessels to move the vast armies of the Imperial Guard or the chapters of Space Marines into combat. But for many years they were not even a playable faction, and just sort of hung around in the background, making everything in their great forge worlds and occasionally letting loose their Titan legions on the battlefield. For those of you who aren't into 40k, a Titan is a two-legged, colossal walking, death-dealing construct that is piloted by 1 to 3 humans depending on its size. When I say colossal, the Scout Titan is 50 foot tall, Battle Titans are around 150 to 200 foot tall, but the biggest Titan, the Imperator class, is around 500 foot tall. Now Titans are a video all to themselves, so I won't be covering them today. Also, if you're not yet a subscriber, please hit that subscribe button, and if you already are, then share this video with someone who is new to 40k. So back when humans were first starting to explore our own galaxy, it didn't take long for them to colonise Mars. Now Mars remained politically separate from Terra, and with a short amount of time the Martians created their own culture and were keen to explore and colonise more of the galaxy. The Emperor at this point has not revealed himself or started unifying humanity, so Mars and Terra are two effectively separate factions. The Martians had at this point terraformed Mars from the harsh red desert that we know into a lush, beautiful, verdant planet teeming with plant life. But this is 40k, and we can't have beautiful things. So naturally, when things started going south in the whole galaxy, there was a civil war on Mars, burning up most of the breathable atmosphere and turning it back into a harsh red desert wasteland. The emerging faction of this civil war was the Mechanicum of Mars, who then proceeded to build giant forge cities all over the planet. The members of the Mechanicum replaced many parts of their bodies with cybernetics, to both prolong their lives and to help them live in the now again harsh climate of Mars. This cult Mechanicum began worshipping technology like a god, and even created the notion of the Omnissiah, which is expressed in the form of any technology. The bigger and better the tech, the more it has the presence of the Omnissiah, which is why they call the Titans the god engines of war. It's this reverence for technology that is also where the joke of them fucking toasters comes from, which I think is just childish and silly and will never be mentioned again. At some point, they thought this planet covered in giant factories was a great idea, so started sending out colony ships first at sublight speeds and eventually with warp drives to colonise more planets, with Mars being the template. These worlds would become known as Forge Worlds. Forge Worlds are industrial powerhouses of insane scales that produce, well, everything, from farm machinery to spaceships to military equipment. The humans of Terra would happily colonise pretty much any planet with high or low numbers of both population and resources. For the Mechanicum, it had to be a Forge World, so very few planets or systems had the required amount of resources needed. This resulted in the Martians informing the Terra-aligned humans where there were planets that could be settled, but they would skip by them themselves looking for an ideal world for a Forge World. Around the Forge Worlds the humans from Terra would settle, and so an ecosystem grew around humans trading raw materials with the Martian Forge Worlds in return for completed goods. Anyway, long story short, Galaxy goes to hell in a handbasket. Psykers start being born, so demons are able to start invading from the warp through the Psykers. Not pretty. The AI robots, the Men of Iron, have had enough of the stupid humans making them do all the hard work and decide they're going to fuck off on their own somewhere, but not before shanking every human they could find and stealing all the good shit. Warp storms cut off interstellar travel, so Slanesh is born, getting rid of all the warp storms whilst fucking over the Eldar at the same time. The Emperor finally pops up, unites Terra under his banner, heads to Mars and cuts them a deal that says his soldiers will protect them. In return they have to supply all the gear, but they get to keep control of their Titan legions. The other main part of this deal is that the Mechanicum and its members become the sole faction with the Imperium that deal with technology and science, and also the upkeep of all equipment. Now, Guardsmen may clean their guns occasionally, but in reality everything is maintained by Mechanicum tech priests. This is in turn has further instilled into both branches of humanity an almost religious reverence for the procedures and steps in the creation of anything, which is the Mechanicum believe all technology is from the Omnissiah and the Omnissiah is perfect. so if everything they make is perfect and should not be changed or attempted to be improved upon. This belief has led them to not only being the builders of everything, but also looking at innovation as a form of heresy, unless of course you're very high ranking within the Mechanicum. Rank has its privileges, even in 40k. The innovation is heresy thought train has also spread to the rest of the Imperium, and even to this day people don't mess with the way things are done. Just suggesting doing something different is likely to get you shot. The Mechanicum decided being in charge of all the tech and every factory was a great deal for them, and thus the status quo of them being the suppliers/builders/mechanics, but in the background for 6 editions of 40k, became the accepted norm. The Mechanicum were given a lot of leeway and for all intents and purposes are an empire within an empire, doing their thing as long as the equipment keeps being supplied. Then there was the Chapter House court case, which led to Games Workshop getting a new CEO and 40k becoming the behemoth it was today. It was the aftermath of the Chapter House incident, when 7th edition was released, that we saw all the codexes overhauled and the addition of several new armies that many players, including myself, saw as mostly blatant cash grabs, like the Grey Knights becoming a solo faction after being hit with a nerf hammer to make them more generic psychic space marines, rather than just demon killers. The Custodies, who never left the Emperor's palace as they were his bodyguard, were retconned into the fact that some of them did leave the palace, and so also became an army. At the same time, the Mechanicum got 2 codexes, the Skitarii, which are a cybernetic force of warriors, and the Cult of Mechanicus, which are also a cybernetic force of warriors. By 8th edition, they were merged into one, and the faction was renamed Adeptus Mechanicus because of that whole Chapter House fuck-up Games Workshop made. So if you have a faction that makes everything, and you want to bring it onto the tabletop, it makes sense that they keep all the best guns and tech for themselves and mass-produce crap for the Imperial Guard. The Imperial Guard are a swarm army relying on vast numbers and excessive amounts of tanks, and players having a large enough wallet or willing to sell relatives on the black market to afford it. The Space Marines, on the other hand, are smaller in number but tougher than a $2 steak and can kick ass all day long. The Admech are in the middle, being more powerful than an individual guard, but not as powerful as Space Marines, but definitely leaning more to the quality over quantity aspect. For the army itself, as I haven't played 40k in a while, I can say I have never faced one, so I don't have first-hand knowledge of exactly how they play. But looking at the new codex, I have a good idea, and they are looking quite tough. Very limited selection of vehicles, but a good choice of ranged units and a few melee units. And when I say tough, every unit, except the vehicles, gets an invulnerable save. Not even the Space Marines in their vaunted power armour gets that. Being one of the newer armies and having always been in the background, they don't feel as fleshed out as other armies. They don't seem to have a signature weapon that is synonymous with the Admech. A large portion have a unique upgraded flamer, but like all flamers it is short range. Another good chunk have weapons that shoot electricity at their opponent, and a few have the same weapons you can find in the Imperial Guard Codex. There just doesn't seem to be any consistency with it. So although being tough, they do have to get in close to start doing any real damage, and then keep manoeuvring around to avoid getting tied up in melee. As an army, they don't have a feel about them. Space Marines feel they are built around the bolter and different sized bolters for different units, like the heavy bolters for Devastators, and bolt pistols with chainsaws for melee units. Imperial Guard feel like they're built around mass infantry rushers with tank support. The Admech feels more like they needed a melee unit, so let's arm them with this. Now we need a heavy unit, so let's arm them with this. Now we need a rank and file troop, so we'll give them this weapon. It's like they were using all the leftover weapons from a brainstorming session. Conversely, however, they are the only codex that was released at the time that feels like a natural progression of the lore into the tabletop, rather than a blatant cash grab like the Grey Knights, who I said are trained specifically to fight warp-based creatures and psykers, so having them face orcs is just ridiculous. Or the Custodies, who for years were portrayed as that powerful yet resource intensive to create, they were too expensive to risk in battle. And then there are just completely the made up new factions that someone pulled out of their arsehole during a meeting because they thought it would sell minis, like the Necrons and the Tau. Now, as always with Games Workshop, the Admech minis look amazing, and at some point I will be picking a few up just to paint. But would I collect a full army? Nope. For me, there is very little appeal to their playstyle and mechanics that makes me raise an eyebrow. The units were all designed to fill a function, and they do that really well, but are also perfectly capable of filling other roles in a pinch. To me, they are a cheaper, not quite as tough version of Space Marines on the tabletop. Would I advise anyone else to play them? Absolutely. If over-the-top super soldiers that are jack of all trades and don't require much in the way of advanced tactics is not the playstyle for you, but yet you want something tough and durable that still needs to have a measure of tactics used in play, then the AdMech is probably the army for you. I'm not saying Space Marines don't need to use tactics, but when plans fall apart and you have to start doing things on the fly, Space Marines are more likely able to do that than say the Eldar. Overall, I'm glad to see the AdMech on the table and they're being brought out of the stories and the lore to the actual tabletop. It's, like I said, one of the most natural progressions for any faction ever. But as the other factions have a distinct feel to them, the AdMech still needs to grow and evolve into its identity of a powerful army that can dominate at short-range shooting combat, when they're not fucking toasters, of course. And there we have it. That brings us to the end of this video. If you laughed or learnt anything, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and if you are already subscribed, then don't forget to share this video with somebody who could do with some noob-splaining in their life. Also, leave a comment on your favourite part. I do try and interact with every comment. But if you made it this far, thank you, and I'll see you next time.